days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I want to talk about whether the 49ers have upgraded or downgraded at certain positions. Because I think when you look at this roster, it is a living, breathing thing. And I say that because it seems like over the last couple weeks, we've still had players coming in, players going out, 49ers still making roster decisions, even post-draft, as they have continued to not just sign free agents who have been out on the open market, but also they've been willing to trade, bringing in Bryce Huff. So with that being said, there are certain positions now for the 49ers that you can look at and say, you know what, maybe the 49ers upgraded there. And then there's other positions you look at and you say, maybe it was a downgrade. 49ers just don't have enough. Maybe they don't have enough proven experience. Maybe they don't have the depth that they used to have. And I think that plays a big part in it too. Where did you get the depth? Do you have more depth than you had last year? And one of the most difficult things to decipher is positions where you lost players, but they didn't even contribute to your 2024 team, right? You talk about a guy like Dre Greenlaw. When we're talking about did you upgrade or downgrade from 2024, Dre Greenlaw played one half. Does he really even count? Or are you going off what you got from Devondre Campbell, what you got from, D. Winters, and you're not really looking at 2023? And I think that in that department, it could change the way you evaluate. But I thought, let's go through this exercise and let's look at the 49ers roster position by position. And let's talk about the positions where it looks like maybe they upgraded, other positions it looks like they downgraded, and we can kind of get an idea of where this 49ers roster sits as they are going through the offseason. Of course, we've got OTAs going on. Mini camp is just around the corner, and the 49ers are working towards getting ready for training camp. It's going to be a small time of OTAs and minicamp, and then they're going to go away for 40 days, and they're going to prepare for training camp. But right now, evaluating this roster and where it's at is one of the things that we need to go through. This is going to prepare us for training camp. When we start hearing about training camp battles, when we start hearing about who's showing up and showing out, and which positions that aren't really looking up to speed, I think it's a fun conversation. So please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. That's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. If you like what you hear, please give it a 5-star rating. Go ahead and click that automatic download. That helps a lot. Share this with your friends. I really appreciate it. And of course, if you are into betting, bet with BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs. And BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With a large selection of odds on everything from MLB, NBA, NHL, and UFC, BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. So, going through the roster, you find additions and subtractions, and they are going to alter the way you look at each position and how that position group is going to help the 49ers in 2024. So I went through and I looked at it offensively, I looked at it defensively, looked at special teams, looked at the coaching staff, and started evaluating. What positions did the 49ers get better at? Which ones did they not? And in some cases, it seems like it's pretty close. And so we want to take that into account. And at the end of the episode, we'll know, is this roster better than last year? That might be hard to say. Is this roster maybe got more to prove this season? I think that's easy to say. And so this is going to be a fun one. I'm going to start with the quarterback position. And the 49ers lost 2 quarterbacks during the offseason. Brandon Allen, he moved on. He signed in free agency elsewhere. Joshua Dobbs, he moved on in free agency. He signed elsewhere. And so the 49ers lost 2 veterans at the position. But they also added 2 quarterbacks to the position. First off, they added Mac Jones. And Mac Jones not only has been a starter in the NFL, but he's been a first round pick, number 15 overall, in fact, in the 2021 NFL draft that produced Trey Lance. Now, Mac hasn't exactly had the best career numbers. He hasn't tore up the NFL. And of course, if he did, he wouldn't be available for the 49ers as a backup quarterback. But we've already seen this happen before, right? We've seen a guy who was a top of the first round type guy get drafted by the New York Jets and really struggle around the league, then end up in San Francisco and fix everything as the backup quarterback for Brock Purdy and go out and get himself a couple of good contracts out of the open market. And of course, I'm talking about, Sam Darnold. And now you've got Mac Jones, who's got a similar pedigree, guy that played at a big time college, had a lot of success, got drafted in the top 15 picks. I don't think that anyone believes he's as physically gifted as Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks we've seen come around in a long time. When you're talking about arm strength, athleticism, ability to, read through his reads, go through his progressions and make the proper throws, Sam Darnold just is one of those guys. But Mac Jones has the ability to go through progressions and make proper reads and throw with pretty good accuracy. He's got a little bit of zip on the ball as well. So you lost it. You lost a couple of guys, but you got in Mac Jones. Mac Jones is better than Joshua Dobbs. Mac Jones is better than Brandon Allen. And so you improved at the position that way. But you also drafted Curtis Rourke. And by drafting Curtis Rourke, you've allowed yourself to add at the position as well. So you've got two guys in. Now you've got a couple of young guys that you really like. But Mac Jones is the key. I think you upgraded the quarterback position. You re-signed Brock Purdy. You brought in Mac Jones. And you're feeling comfortable about quarterback. Running back gets a little bit more interesting. You traded away a guy that you really liked. And I think that is hard to do. You trade away Jordan Mason, and I said this a while ago. In fact, I was saying it at the end of last season that I thought that Jordan Mason was probably going to be traded. And the reason I said that, they couldn't financially afford to pay him, $5.2 million per year if he was going to get a second round tender. And so the 49ers did. They moved on. They used that draft pick to select Marquise Siegel in the NFL draft. And so Jordan Mason's not there. So as soon as you see a subtraction of Jordan Mason, the first thought is, hey, this running back room got worse. But the 49ers drafted Isaac Rendo last year. And I think Isaac Rendo showed a lot of promise. And so that kind of helps derail a lot of the question marks about the position. Is you feel like you've got Isaac Guerendo ready to step in. Now, do I believe Guerendo is where Jordan Mason was last year? No, I don't. Does he have more dynamics? Yes. But he's not as complete a player right now as Jordan Mason, just in his running style. Jordan Mason had better vision. He was a little bit better at breaking tackles. Those were elements to his game that were better than Guerendo. Guerendo has some other things that are better about him. He catches the ball in the backfield better than Jordan Mason, and he's got that elite speed. Those things play hugely into what makes him, a solid player. So I don't think that's an exact wash. But when you look at the rest of the 49ers running back room, Patrick Taylor's coming back, and so that's kind of a wash. But you had the injury last year to Elijah Mitchell. And I think Elijah Mitchell, not being able to help the football team last year definitely weakened the running back room. And so you didn't have as much talent at the position. You were bringing guys in training camp, guys like Matt Breida, looking for running backs that could help. You also didn't have a healthy Christian McCaffrey last year. So McCaffrey's back, him plus Guerendo. I think that helps. But now you add Jordan James. You've already got Patrick Taylor. You add in Israel Abanikanda. We don't know what happens there, but Kiner. Let's just talk about the top guys. I think even though you lost Jordan Mason, by having a healthy Christian McCaffrey, by having Isaac Guerendo, by having Jordan James, I think those guys together end up making enough that Guerendo and Jordan James make Jordan Mason. And then I think, Patrick Taylor can handle that business, but a healthy Christian McCaffrey makes this an upgrade. And I didn't think I was going to say that coming into this conversation because of Jordan Mason moving on. And you might feel that it's not an upgrade. But I just feel that Guerendo, plus McCaffrey coming back healthy, plus Jordan James, kind of puts this thing in perspective that they're better because of depth. I don't think the number 2 running back is better right now. I think Garendo could be if he can put it together with his vision. But I think you look at the depth, I think it did get a little bit better. And so I'm going to go upgrade at running back. When it comes to wide receiver, this one is tough. Brandon Ayuk is injured. That is not good. That's huge. You trade away Deebo Samuel, that's going to hurt as well. And I think you look at the roster, and it's not like the 49ers roster doesn't have good players. You have Juwan Jennings, you have Ricky Pearsall. That's great. Pearsall looks like he's going to come on and be a very solid player. A lot of the way that we love Garendo, and what he could be, the same sort of thing there projection-wise with Pearsall. Juwan Jennings proved that he's a big-time receiver, nearly 1,000 yards last season as he stepped up into a bigger role and produced, the way that a big-time player should. So Juwan Jennings is huge part of this. That's going to help wipe out some of what you're missing production-wise from either Ayuk or Deebo Samuel. We know Ayuk's going to come back at some point, but when is the big question mark? So I'm going to kind of keep him on the back burner right now when we're talking about upgrade, downgrade. But you bring in Demarcus Robinson, I think that helps as well. And I got to remember to not, eliminate him from the conversation because he could be suspended for the first 3 games. So that's something to remember when you're looking at last year's roster. Deebo Samuel's on. Now, you're not going to make up a Deebo Samuel in any category. And with Brandon Ayuk being out, that's going to be tough as well. Those two guys together were very formidable. Then you had a guy like Chris Conley who was able to help. Because remember, last year you had Ayuk, Deebo, Juwan, young Pearsall, young Cowing, Chris Conley. That was a talented group. This year's a little bit different. You look at it right now, let's throw Ayuk out, let's throw Deebo out, and let's go. Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Watkins, right? I mean, I think that this is that right now, looking at the wide receiver room, I have to say it's a downgrade. And it doesn't mean that these guys aren't going to elevate their game. It doesn't mean that Ricky Pearsall's not going to step up into the next level, that Demarcus Robinson's not going to play really well, Jacob Cowing's not going to make an impact, Jordan Watkins won't turn into being a significant player. But I think just looking at it on paper right now, you lost an all-pro caliber player in Deebo. Now, he's all-pro when he's playing at his best. I don't want everyone to think he's consistently an all-pro. He had a lot of drops last year. I get it. I mean, if you wanted to say, hey, Juwan Jennings handled the Brandon Ayuk, production, you could say that. But Pearsall, and the rest are going to really have to step up, and they were a part of this roster last year. So I think it's a little bit of a downgrade for the 49ers, but I'm open to this thing improving if Pearsall and Jacob Cowing and Jordan Watkins can step up. Who knows? Maybe you'll get something out of Isaiah Hodgins or Russell Gage or Isaiah Nair, and then maybe that will kind of tip this thing a little bit of a different direction. But when you lose a guy who's been an all-pro in his career and you don't replace him with another all-pro, I think it's going to be a downgrade at wide receiver. But you upgraded at quarterback, you upgraded at running back, a small downgrade at wide receiver as you look to get younger at the position, and you're dealing with injuries and suspensions. At tight end, I think that the 49ers upgraded. And it's not that hard to upgrade over last year's tight end room. You lost Charlie Warner last year. You lost Ross Dwelly. And you brought in some guys that had been, around the league a little bit. And you brought in Eric Saubert. You brought in Jake Tungis. He had been a part of the practice squad. You had Braden Willis. But it didn't really look like it was going to work out, to be very dominant. Well, you go out in free agency this year, you get Luke Farrell. So now you've replaced the Charlie Warner role that you were missing so much last year, and then you brought back Ross Dwelly. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of Ross Dwelly as like a tight end 2, I am okay with Ross Dwelly being tight end 3, especially with the players that you have behind him. Braden Willis, Jake Tungis, Mason Pline. Pline has got a lot of development still to go. I like the athleticism. Maybe he'll be able to compete this year, but he was a long ways away. But Braden Willis, Jake Tungis, they didn't really show anything last year. So I do believe it or not, that this room got better because I think last year Saubert, and either Braden Willis or Jake Tungis are just not as good as Farrell and Dwelly together. Farrell's an upgrade over Saubert. Dwelly is an upgrade over Braden Willis, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope Braden Willis steps up and makes some plays, but I do think that this is an upgrade. And it starts with that tight end, the blocking role, which is going to be the best it's been since 2023. And then you lost Charlie Warner to the Atlanta Falcons. So upgrade at tight end. So far, upgrade at quarterback, upgrade at running back, downgrade at wide receiver, upgrade at tight end. Now we go to the offensive line. And this one is one that everyone was screaming from the rooftops to improve during the offseason. And the 49ers had a couple of losses in free agency. And first off, it starts with Aaron Banks, the starting left guard, and he did not play particularly well last year. But he goes to Green Bay and he gets $18 million per year and gets paid just an astronomical amount of money for an offensive lineman that plays on the inside at guard. And the 49ers, of course, were not going to meet that. But you get Aaron Banks moving on. Then I think one that's even as significant, because it's not a starter, but it was a huge role for the 49ers, is Jalen Moore. Jalen Moore leaves in free agency, goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, gets $15 million per year to be a tackle. And that was the 49ers swing tackle. And that was the guy that stepped in all the training camp practices, stepped in the games when Trent Williams was out. So that's two big losses. So what did the 49ers do to try to upgrade the position? Well, first off, they brought back Ben Bartch, and I think that, they see Ben Bartch as a potential starter at the position. They have Nick Sakel. He's still evolved, but they brought in some guys as well in free agency and the draft. So free agency wise, they brought in two tackles. If we're talking about the swing tackle, they brought in Andre Dillard from the Green Bay Packers, former first-round pick, has never really lived up to those expectations. He's played in the system. He understands it, but he hasn't been a consistent left tackle. Maybe Chris Furster could figure him out, but that's a little concerning. The other one they brought in at tackle was Nicholas Petit-Frere. And Petit-Frere was a third-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. He's more built to play right tackle, hyper-athletic, lacks a little bit of the anchor ability, some of the things that you would really like from a right tackle, right? Think of this guy more on the athletic Mike McGlinchey style role for this offense. And that's the guys you brought in on the outside. Everyone was hoping it was DJ Humphries. And I'll say this, if it was DJ Humphries, I would think they upgraded their swing tackle. Right now, I do not believe that. I feel more comfortable last year with Jalen Moore than I feel with Andre Dillard and Nicholas Petit-Frere right now. Maybe Dillard will figure it out. He played in Green Bay's scheme last year. It's not going to be that much different in San Francisco. Maybe he'll be able to develop a little bit. Then on the inside, the guys they brought in that are going to compete, they drafted Connor Kobe in the 7th round. They signed undrafted free agent Drew Moss. Those two guys are going to compete. And then last year at the end of the year, they brought in Matt Hennessy. So Hennessy has a chance to potentially upgrade center. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jake Brendel is going to start. I think that you have Ben Bartch playing left guard, potentially, maybe Nick Sakel. I don't think Connor Kobe fits into that conversation. So I know that we've gotten weaker when it comes to swing tackle. When it comes to guard, it depends. I think that Aaron Banks didn't play particularly well last year. But in 2023, there were a long stretch when Aaron Banks wasn't hurt where he played really well. So I don't think overall, and Ben Bartch, Nick Sakel, Spencer Burford, one of them may give us more consistency at left guard at some point. But I think right now it's projection. And I think with Jalen Moore moving on and us not getting a consistent swing tackle, the 49ers not getting a guy that you feel comfortable as Jalen Moore, and not improving some of the other positions, I think the 49ers downgraded along the offensive line. And yes, you're getting Trent Williams back. That's a huge upgrade. We counted that with a Christian McCaffrey, but Trent did play, part of the year last year. But I think when you look at swing tackle and you look at potential starter, it could be a downgrade. I think this one's pretty close. I think, like I said, if they had DJ Humphries, I would say this is an upgrade because I would put him as a big upgrade over Jalen Moore. I think he's been more consistent in his career. And then you could figure it out with Bartch and them because worst comes to worst, DJ Humphries could slide into guard and you would get a really good starter. So I don't think it's like a big fall down, but I do have some concerns about our swing tackle compared to what I had before. So I'm going to go ahead and let's say even Bartch was a wash with Aaron Banks. He's still downgraded at swing tackle. And so that's kind of where I'm going to keep it. So on the offensive side of the ball, you had 3 upgrades at positions and 2 downgrades at positions. Now let's get to the defense. First off, defensive end. And coming out of the draft, you get Mikael Williams. And you needed to get somebody because you let Leonard Floyd leave in free agency. And you actually released him. So that was a little bit shocking of a move. So the 49ers had Nick Bosa. They had Sambo Kawanu. They had Robert Beal Jr., and they had a lot of question marks after that. So they go out and they draft Mikael Williams, huge addition. Now, I think that would have been, Gross Matos being back healthy would have kind of pushed this towards, it was close. But going out and getting a player in free agency like Bryce Huff, that put it over the top. That made it an upgrade. Because now when you look at it, Bryce Huff takes a Leonard Floyd role as the designated pass rusher. Yetur Gross-Matos returns for the same role he had last year, but healthy. But now you add Mikael Williams, who's a top 11 pick. Now you have 4 very solid defensive ends. So you've upgraded the position massively. More talent, more speed, more athleticism. And now you've got a deeper roster as well. Now competing for a roster spot is Sambo Kawanu and Robert Beal Jr. So, guys, one of them was locked into making this team, and before the trade, both of them were probably going to make this team. And now, one of them is going to make this team. They got so much better. This is a huge upgrade for the 49ers defensive end position, and it's interesting how one move, right, can change it, can turn things in a different direction. And that one move put the 49ers in a good situation now at defensive end. Now it's a huge upgrade. Maybe one of the biggest upgrades of any of the positions we've seen so far. And this was a question as they were going through free agency and they weren't signing Joey Bosa. And they weren't signing these other free agents. They were just willing to wait. Now, defensive tackle, this is one that I had a lot of difficulty with as I was going through and I was thinking about who left, who came in. This one was one of the most difficult to ascertain who is the upgrade, who has been downgraded at the position. Because I think that the 49ers had a shift in philosophy that's going to affect how we think about the position. First off, the 49ers lose Javon Hargrave with a June 1st designation. Same with Malik Collins. Both those guys just came off the books just recently. So they lost those guys. That was huge losses at defensive line. Now, what they did was go get rookies to fill those positions. They went and got CJ West. They went and got Alfred Collins. And it's a shift. This isn't an apples to apples comparison. When you look at Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave, these guys are pass rush maniacs. Malik Collins has gotten 5 sacks in 3 straight seasons. That is tying a career best every single year. And then Javon Hargrave, we've seen him have the ability to get double-digit sacks. Now, of course, he got injured last year. So you see the pass rush. 49ers went all defensive run stopping in the draft. CJ West, Alfred Collins, they're known as run stoppers. In fact, the 49ers got 3 of the top 4 run stoppers in the league. Mikael Williams, Alfred Collins, CJ West. Phenomenal. So this is really an interesting dynamic because Jordan Elliott's still on the team. Leah Davis still on the team. Evan Anderson still on the team. Kevin Givens still on the team. So you just basically flipped out the 2 veterans who have proved they could do it when it comes to pass rush. And they stopped the run a little bit. Malik Collins battled a lot last year. And you go with the 2 young guys. So that's why it was so hard for me. Because I think Alfred Collins and CJ West are going to play the run better than their counterparts in year 1. But I don't think they're going to pass rush like them in year 1. So I think it's a interesting situation where I think they're going to be better against the run this season, but they're not going to be as good as far as rushing the passer in the interior. Now, those moves at defensive end filter in. So that is a huge category with this. So I think that it was a huge improvement when it came to run defense and an upgrade. And I think it was a downgrade when it came to pass rush from the defensive tackle position. I think the 49ers have built in a plan to account for that pass rush issue by having Gross Matos and Mikael Williams capable of moving inside on obvious pass downs, and it's going to kind of work it out. I also believe that you give it this, a year, or maybe a half a year. We'll see. TJ West and Alfred Collins are going to get better pass rushing. They're going to show some upside. Are they going to be Javon Hargrave? Are they going to be Malik Collins? I think they have the capabilities to believe Malik Collins and get 5 sacks. If they can get to that double-digit sack level, this 49ers defense is going to take another step forward. So I think it's an upgrade in run defense. I think it's a downgrade in pass. I'm going to go ahead and say that it is an upgrade because of the defensive end's effects on defensive tackle. Just going to keep it like that. But just know that I'm conflicted on this. And if you see it one way or the other, I'm fine, because the rookies haven't proven anything so far. And so if we wanted to say that was a downgrade, I would be okay with that. At linebacker, now you say, hey, Dre Greenlaw's gone. This one's got to be a downgrade. But I'm not putting Dre Greenlaw in this category. And you can say I'm wrong for doing that or not. But Dre Greenlaw played one half in 2024. You're not really upgrading over Dre Greenlaw 2024. You're having to go back to what he was in 2023. Now, we do know Dre Greenlaw is one of the best linebackers in the league. And so if you put it that way, it's going to be hard to replace. But I'm looking at what happened in 2024. And I believe that the 49ers have upgraded the position. And you might say, why? Well, DFF is gone, right? He moved on. Devondre Campbell, he moved on. And now D. Winters, who started last year at Sandbacker, he's back. And you added Nick Martin in the 3rd round. I think that was huge additions. But the reason I'm going with a major upgrade is the depth. Last year at linebacker, 0 depth at linebacker. This year, a ton of depth at linebacker. When you look at who they got on their roster, they've got a lot of guys at linebacker that are going to be able to help this team that they've brought in. You got guys that, number one, Saleh feels comfortable with, right? You got Chaz Surratt. You brought in Luke Gifford. You've got Curtis Robinson, Tatum Bethune, Stone Blanton. And so your depth at the position has gotten so much better, especially when you talk about the veterans. So Fred Warner, he's still going to be great. D. Winters will be better than he was last year. Nick Barton is a nice addition. I believe just athleticism-wise, they are going to be much better than Devondre Campbell. That's going to be huge. But then you look at the guys they brought in, Chaz Surratt, who's played in this system. He understands what Robert Saleh wants. I think that helps improve the position, and that's a move that just happened within the last couple of weeks. Then you get Luke Gifford. I think that was a huge addition as well. Tatum Bethune looks like he's taking a step forward. Curtis Robinson's healthy. He couldn't help the team last year. To me, it's an upgrade at the position when you look at total depth. Now, if you put Dre Greenlaw in this category and you say, hey, no, I want to count him, then no, the 49ers couldn't upgrade, because Dre Greenlaw, healthy Dre Greenlaw, there is not one of these linebackers that can touch him right now. You're hoping Nick Martin could eventually be a Dre Greenlaw type player, but this would be a complete projection. So if that's how you're doing it, you're going to say this is a downgrade. I'm saying because of the 2024 roster and the way it was, and the same way that, I kind of talked about some of the other players, and I've talked about Ayuk, I think that this is going to be an upgrade over Devondre Campbell and over D. Winters last year. So I think D's going to be better, and I think that Nick Martin, D. Winters together are much better than Devondre Campbell. So I'm going with an upgrade. So just so we have it clear right now, defensive end upgrade. Defensive tackle, I went upgrade, but I said straight up, it's in the run defensive part, pass defense, not so much of an upgrade, but the defensive ends are going to fix that by playing NASCAR package. Linebacker upgrade, with the caveat you don't count Greg Greenlaw because he didn't play last year. Now, cornerback, you lost Charvarius Ward. That was the big loss at cornerback. You lost other guys as well that you liked. I think you liked having Rock Yassin. I think you liked having some of those depth guys like Isaac Yedem. I don't think those are as big a losses as Charvarius Ward. But when you think about the 3 cornerback combo for the 49ers last year, Charvarius Ward, De'Amon Lenoir, and Renardo Green, I don't think you can duplicate how good that is. So you got, Charvarius Ward moving on. And in comes Renardo Green to be the consistent guy on the outside with De'Amon Lenoir. But the question is, who's the third guy? Trey Brown, he showed some ability. You drafted Upton Stout. One of them is going to step in. Brown on the outside, Stout on the inside. I don't think that you can measure up there. Now, I do think the 49ers have added when it comes to depth at the position, which I love because you needed to get better. You couldn't count on some of the other guys, that were going to have to step in. I like the fact they brought in Dallas Flowers. And if you don't know about this guy, he was going to have a shot to start with the Indianapolis Colts, and then he tore his Achilles in 2023. He was competing for a spot. Last year when he came back, he just wasn't the same. And so they had to move in a different direction. So remember him along the way, too, as we're talking about potential cornerbacks for the 49ers. But, I just don't think right now we have a lot of answers. Some of the young guys we really like, Jacob Robinson, Derek Canteen, I think those guys are very interesting. But we don't know what we're going to get from Darrell Luter Jr., and we don't know what we're going to get from the young guy like Upton Stout, or even the veteran Trey Brown, who I think is right now expected to be in that top 3. So I'm going to say downgrade. I think it was just too good last year with Tarvarius Ward, De'Amon Lenoir, and Renardo Green. But I don't think that they're in a position where they can't get better. I just think top end wise, they need one of these guys to step up. Trey Brown's got to be really, really good, or Upton Stout's got to be really, really good. So I do think it's a downgrade at the position at cornerback. I think they got younger, which is definitely needed, and you've got to continue to grow, but it's tougher. Now let's talk about safety. You lose Talanoa Hufanga. Hufanga did play, some games last year, and you added Malik Mustafa. Mustafa was a big addition, but we've seen Ji'Yair Brown take a step back. And so I think when you look at who went out, when you're talking about starters, and you lose Talanoa Hufanga, I think that that's going to make it tough to upgrade the position. Now, the 49ers did their best when it came to free agency. They went out and they got Richie Grant. They went out and they got Jason Pinnock. They still had George Odom. They brought in and drafted Marcus Siegel. So it's not like they haven't invested at the position. They have some guys that are very interesting. But when you're talking about losing an all-pro, and I talked about this with Deebo Samuel, you're not going to be able to erase that production or eliminate that production bringing in these other guys. I think you can get good production, but not to that level. Now, if Ji'Yair would have taken a step forward to go with Malik Mustafa coming on the scene, I think we could add a conversation that between the two of them, they upgraded the position. But I don't think that's the case. I think Ji'Yair took 2 steps back last year. He's going to have to step forward this year to make a huge impact. And Malik Mustafa is going to start injured. So what is his season going to look like? So I think that they added some depth, and if you looked at just depth, they're definitely deeper at the position between Siegel and Grant and Pinnock. But I think when you look at the starters, I think there's more question marks at the position right now than answers. So I'm going to say downgrade. So on defense, I think it was kind of like offense. You got 3 positions that are probably upgrades and 3 positions that are downgrades, or 2 positions that are downgrades. And I think that's what makes it tough. I think if you put DN and D tackle together, you get an upgrade. That's kind of what I did at the position. But, the secondary is a question mark. They went really young. Now, let's look at special teams real quick. I think they upgraded long snapper with John Weeks. I think that was a huge upgrade for them. And I think that Brant Boyer's done a very good job of upgrading the special teams overall. Punter, I don't know if it's an upgrade. I think that Morstead is a consistent punter, but I think Wishnowsky, the question marks about his back were just too much for the 49ers. So I'm not going to count that one an upgrade or a downgrade. If you're talking about Wishnowsky barely punting last year, well, then it would be an upgrade, right? So if we keep to that, we're going to go with that direction. But a long snapper was a huge, huge upgrade. Now, the 2 upgrades that were probably the biggest of any single position on the entire team have to be the coaching staff. Defensive coordinator Robert Saleh, huge upgrade over Nick Sorensen last year. This is going to change his defense. You see his fingerprints all over the offseason signings, the draft picks. There is a different way of doing defense with Robert Saleh at the helm. Robert Saleh, a massive upgrade for the 49ers. They're going to fill this for years to come. He's establishing what this defense is going to look like, and they're setting it up, too. They have a contingency plan. If he ends up moving on, Gus Bradley's ready to step in and take over this defense, and the 49ers are building it for years to come, and I love that. The fingerprints, the way that they're handling business is great. This special teams coordinator, huge upgrade. We've already seen it with Brant Boyer and the players that he's bringing in. Not afraid to make changes or upset the apple cart. He's bringing in guys he feels are going to get it done. Now, he still has a big decision to make when it comes to Jake Moody, but if he can get Moody right, that's a huge feather in his cap. But if he sees that he needs to make a move and he does, that's also a big feather in his cap. So I think the coordinators may be the biggest upgrades on the entire team. But overall, when you look at the upgrades, the 49ers definitely have improved in several areas. In other areas, it hasn't got better than last year. There's potential, but right now, potential hasn't showed up. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Which positions do they upgrade? Which positions do they downgrade? And I'm curious to see what your point of view is on several positions. Let me know. And, I'm always curious to check them out. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Give it a 5-star rating. And if you enjoyed the episode, I appreciate it. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.